The sun hovered like a molten coin above the endless prairie as the poor rancher tightened the last rope on his half-fixed fence. His land stretched far, but his resources were few weather-beaten cattle, a creaking barn, and a life defined by sweat more than comfort. That morning, he carried only a dented canteen of water and a heart that believed mercy still mattered, even in a land where grudges grew faster than grass. He didn't expect visitors, and he definitely didn't expect riders from the Apache band that had been at odds with settlers for months. He saw them before he heard them, 3 silhouettes moving like shadows across the shimmering heat. His breath stalled. Apache warriors never approached a ranch alone unless they were scouting, angry or desperate, and none of those options promised safety. Yet as they drew near, he noticed the slump in their shoulders, the weariness etched in their faces, the way one leaned heavily on the saddle as though barely conscious. Their horses were gaunt, dust-coated, ribs sharp beneath stretched hide. These weren't warriors arriving for a fight. These were men on the edge of collapse. The rancher didn't move as they halted before him. The leader dismounted slowly, eyes locked with his. No words came, just a silent plea carried in the tremble of his hands. The rancher swallowed hard, aware of the weight of the moment. Offering help could brand him a traitor to settlers. Refusing could condemn suffering men to death. His father had once told him, "Out here, a man's worth is tested when he has nothing left to give." Remembering that, he lifted the canteen and extended it toward the leader. The Apache man hesitated only a second before taking it, tilting his head back and drinking like a man starved of life itself. The rancher stepped back, letting each warrior drink without fear or rush. The rasp of their breaths filled the still morning air. When the canteen came back empty, the rancher didn't think twice. He motioned toward his cabin. "There's more inside," he said quietly. Suspicion flickered in their eyes, but exhaustion defeated caution. They followed him, entering the small wooden cabin that smelled of sun-warmed timber and coffee grounds. Inside, the rancher filled cups from the barrel he'd hauled from the creek at dawn. The warriors drank in silence. Up close, he saw their injuries, a deep gash in one man's ribs, another's bruised jaw, the third's trembling legs. They weren't coming back from a hunt or patrol. They had survived something brutal and recent. When the leader finally spoke, his voice was weak but steady. "Our village, attacked before sunrise. We fought. We lost. We ran." The rancher felt the weight of those words settle like iron in the room. He bandaged their wounds with torn strips of linen, the same way he'd patched injured calves and injured ranch hands alike. One warrior winced but didn't pull away. Another whispered a word of thanks in his own language. The leader watched the rancher closely, as if trying to understand what kind of man would help his enemies without hesitation. When the rancher finished, the leader bowed his head slightly. Respect, not submission. Gratitude, not weakness. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of dust and something darker ashes. Their village truly had burned. Hours passed, and the prairie cooled into late afternoon. The rancher cooked what little he had: cornbread, beans, and dried venison, and shared it without expecting repayment. The warriors ate sparingly, each bite slow and reverent. When they finished, the leader finally asked the question hanging between them. "Why?" The rancher shrugged, leaning back in his chair. "War don't fix anything when men are thirsty." The leader stared at him, and for the first time his hardened face softened, not with pity, but with a recognition of rare kindness in a brutal land. By evening, the warriors regained enough strength to stand. The leader approached him and placed a carved bone pendant into his hand. It was warm, smoothed by years of wear. "This marks a man as a friend," he said. "Keep it. If our people see it, they won't raise a weapon." The rancher didn't know what to say. The pendant was more than protection, it was trust, offered by men who had every reason to hate him. Before he could thank them, a distant horn echoed across the plains, sharp and alarming. The warriors stiffened instantly. "More riders," the leader warned. The rancher stepped onto the porch and saw dust rising, a group of settlers racing toward his ranch, rifles slung across their backs. They must have spotted the Apache horses near his cabin. Fear churned in his chest. The settlers would assume the worst, that he was harboring enemies. Shots could be fired before anyone explained a thing. The rancher turned to the warriors, then back to the approaching riders. He stood taller than he felt. "Stay behind me," he said. "No one's dying today." The settlers thundered into the yard, their horses skidding to a halt. "You all right?" One shouted, eyes darting to the shadows behind the rancher. Another pointed his rifle. "You giving aid to the same people who raided Turner's place last month?" Tension crackled like lightning. The rancher raised both hands. "They ain't raiding. They're hurt. Their village was attacked. They needed water." Laughter and disbelief rippled through the settlers. "You're gonna get yourself killed helping people who'd slit your throat," one barked. But the rancher stood firm, jaw tight. The leader stepped forward just enough to be seen, standing beside the rancher instead of behind him. A silent message, they weren't hiding. The settlers tensed, fingers grazing their triggers. Before violence could erupt, the rancher held up the pendant. "They gave me this. Means peace. Means they're under my protection today?" One settler scoffed. Another shifted uncertainly. The third, older and scarred, stared long and hard before sighing. "If he vouches for M, we step back. Man's word still counts for something." The rifles lowered reluctantly but decisively. The settlers departed, leaving dust swirling in their wake. The rancher exhaled slowly, shoulders dropping. The leader stepped beside him, looking at the horizon where the settlers disappeared. "Today," he said quietly, "you stopped a war from growing." The rancher shook his head. "Just gave water." The leader touched his shoulder, a rare gesture of deep respect. "Water saved us. Water saved them. Water saved peace." The sun dipped, washing the prairie in gold. For the first time, the land felt less divided. More hopeful, kinder. When the warriors finally mounted their horses, the leader paused. "Someday," he said, "you will call on us. And we will come." They rode off, leaving the rancher alone in the cooling dusk, the pendant heavy in his palm. He watched them fade into the horizon and thought about how simple kindness had shifted the course of two peoples. He was still a poor rancher, still fighting weather and wolves and broken fences. But that day, he had done something great. Something that would echo longer than the war ever would.